So now I'm cleaning with brake cleaner all the cylinders like that. Try to remove all the dirt or grease that is in there. And then we're gonna check, prior to assembly, we're gonna check the fit of at the end play of the rings. So I'm cleaning that, I'm gonna show after that. So as a reminder, I measured the cylinders after the rework, and I measured all the pistons, and I make a match between each other so I got the proper fit for all of them. For example, the larger piston would be installed in the larger cylinder. They're not big differences, but they are. These are the gaps at the bottom. The specs are for 0.0012 maximum. It's in between 0 and that. So that's fine. So the piston that's going to be fit here is the one that I named piston number 3. Here it's going to be piston number 5, 1, 4, 2, and 6 goes in 6. This is pulley side, so this is the cylinder number 1, but the best fit is to use the piston that I numbered the piston number 3. So what we're doing now is I reopen these envelopes in which I had put the piston rings in there, and we have to insert the rings in the cylinders. As you can see here, there's the ring. This is the first ring that's on top. I set it, this is arbitrary dimension, I set it at 1 inch. I locked the caliper, and I just make sure all around that I got it set to the right height. You can measure several places. You just want to make sure that the ring is not like sideways. It has to be flat to the surface. Once we have that, we have to check with the filler gauge what's the gap here in between the joint. Let me show you. As you can see here, we see the groove. This is the end of the ring, compression ring. So this groove has to be in between 0.18 millimeter. This is the minimum gap, and the maximum gap of the first. We're talking about the top compression ring on the top of the cylinder, and maximum is 0.33. Again, check your specs. Don't rely necessarily on what I have. This is what I found. So I'm using my filler gauge here, and we'll try to make sure that this one should fit, because it's let me try to show you. It's 0.178, so we're looking for 0.18. That should fit in there. So you can see it's going in. That's good. And the bigger one, 0.33 millimeter, that should not fit. So if I'm looking for a filler gauge, 0.33. So that one should not go, or if it goes, cannot go higher than that. It's not really going. If I would force it, maybe it will, but you can see there's a gap behind the filler gauge in the cylinder. So this ring is good. So that's good. So I'm going to remove it. So you just insert those by hand. Make sure your cylinders are clean. We want to go easy with that. We try not to make too much scratches, but it's not. There's going to be lots of cycle of that. Okay, so first one is good. Then we're going to insert the second one, second ring. We got to make sure that the top is on top. We had them set in the proper way in the envelope, but the two first are written top on those. So again, same width. So we're using the tape here, setting this thing straight. So you can see this is not straight here, so we're going to put it down. making sure it's all at 1 inch all around. Oops. Okay, so that's good. So for that second ring, the clearance at the end on the gap, we should have, it's in between 0.3 millimeter up to 0.5 millimeter. So I got these set here. So I got 0.305 here on that filler gauge. So that should go in. So that's going in, no problem. And then 0.5, I got 0.508. So that should not go through. It's not going through. So that's pretty good. The oil compression ring, we don't have any specs. So what we want to do, we're doing the same thing, but we just want to make sure that there is a gap at the end. We want to make sure they're not going to overlap. It should be all right as well, but that's the only thing we're going to do. The middle one, the spring that goes with it, we're not going to do nothing about this because it's very hard to figure. Then this thing is, it's like a spring. It's a zigzag compression ring. So that one we cannot do nothing with it. So if I take these small ones, I mark a dot on those to know which side is up. Okay, so we just insert those, same thing. We're looking for the 1 inch. No need for filler gauge for those. But we can tell right away there's a gap, so that's fine. It's not as precise. If you look here, we can see there's a gap in between. Yeah, we can see the gap right there. Okay, so this one passed the test, so we can remove it. We keep the right order in between those again. So that's the zigzag I was talking about. This zigzag thing, it's like a spring. You cannot really check. I mean, it's gonna be meaningless. There's seems to be a gap, but you can play so much with it that you don't just check that one. And the final one, the bottom one for the oil compression ring, because the oil compression ring is a set of 3. So you got one of those that goes on top, then you got the zigzag spring kind of one, and then you have this one that goes on the bottom. There's a gap on that one as well, as you can see right here. If you can see it with the light, yeah, we can see it like that right here. So this cylinder, all the rings are good, so we're gonna put them back in the envelopes in the right order they were. We're gonna wash and repeat for all of those. Okay, we're now in cylinder number 4, second compression ring from the top of the piston. The maximum filler gauge that should not get in, kind of getting in almost, or it's kind of tight, but it's getting in. This is this is 508 in millimeter. Should not be bigger than 5.5. Okay, so what happened is when I checked this cylinder number 5, compression ring number 1 was too loose on the end plate with the filler gauge. So, and when I check on my sheet here, If you look at cylinder number 4 and cylinder number 5, they're about the same size, but if you look at cylinder number 6, it's slightly smaller. So what I did is I checked my compression ring that was on cylinder number 4 that was a bit too loose in the end. If I swap it with number 6, the end play was just right. So I swapped the second compression ring and even though it's not the right piston, they're brand new, so it's not making any big difference. And here, the top compression ring that was a bit too small, too big of a hand play, I swap it with that as well. So now every cylinder, all the rings and play is just right in the specs. Okay, so we're cleaning all, with brake cleaner, we're cleaning all the bearing, well, not the bearing, but the place to fit the main bearings. This has got to be completely dry for now. We will, the idea is, well, it has to be dry normally before we assemble that part. But the idea is we're not going to make the final assembly. It's going to be an assembly just to check the clearance between the bearings and the crankshaft. So I'm cleaning all the seals, all the place for the bearings and the place for the crank seal with the brake cleaner. Also, I'm going to clean this surface where we're going to have the seal. So that's what I'm doing now. So we got to make sure this surface is clean. Now we're going to reinstall the nozzles that shoot oil underneath the pistons. So you need to make sure this surface is clean because there's no seal. It's the quality of the surface that makes it to seal. So mine was having a bit of like a little grain of dust or something roll into oil. I don't know how to explain that better than this. So you can just use your rubber glove and it's very easily coming off. If you need, you can also use a little screwdriver. You don't scratch the surface. You use it just to move them around. You don't want to scratch that surface. Okay. Then you gotta make sure that this surface underneath here is clean of any solid component, and the top of it too, and the bottom of the boat here, because these are the surfaces that seal this whole thing. So once you're sure that everything is clean, which I'm gonna do right now, I'm just gonna take a rag and just clean both sides. Okay, and then the boat itself. Okay, so you put the boat back in. You just want to gently screw it by hand. Okay, you don't torque them, you just put them in place, because then we're going to use the tool that we made to locate those. Okay, the idea with that tool is that I need to remove the pin here. I'm gonna take vice grip and remove that pin because I cannot do it otherwise. The idea is that when you screw, since there's cones in there, here and here, you cannot, it's impossible to have perfectly both of them aligned. This is why when we screw them, we screw this one first. So this one is locating the tool that direction and that direction. And this hole, when we screw it, it just prevents it from turning. So this is why I'm always screwing that one first. So then it's just going to repeat itself, whatever has been doing. If it's the boat countersinks are perfectly aligned or not, it's just going to work. So this is loose now, so we're just going to locate it with the jig to grab it. Then we're going to put a screw right here. I remove the pin with a vice grip, gentle, by rocking side to side, clamping it another way around. So then we're just going to tie this like that. Screw the other one. This doesn't have to be torqued so much, it's just to locate. So the countersink does the job for that. So now this is located, so the hose is now cannot move so much. Okay, so now we're gonna torque these bolts. These bolts are to be torqued at 106 pound per inch, not foot, pound per inch. So I'm gonna grab the torque wrench and set it to 106. Here we go, 106. Set it there. Then we torque these both in the right torque. So this one is done. So now we remove this tool. Then we're gonna make sure to clean the surfaces of the nozzle, both sides, the head of the boat, and we wash and rinse and repeat for all the remaining cylinders. We're going to install the bearings. It's very useful to use that plan here that you can find on Real OEM and with the parts number to know what goes where, because you're gonna get lost in there. You'll see there's like a square notch here. I don't know if you can see it. Square notch goes in that square here. So you line them up like that. And then you just push it. You gotta make sure that it's not so hard because there's 2 holes for the oil. So you need to make sure that these holes are lining up. So you do the same for all of those. Make sure you don't have plastics that stays with it. This is the middle one, the one that locates your crank. So again, you got 1 square notch here. And it lines up with that here. So when it's gripped a bit too high, you can use a screwdriver to push it. This one doesn't want to work, so we're going to do it the other way around. Just going to put it higher. You try to make sure that they're the same height on both sides, because when you want to put the other halves, you want it to be smooth. Same thing, the notch with the notch. And you got to make sure the holes, but they're made 2, so but you got to make sure it aligns with the hole in the engine block. So anyway, you keep doing the same for all this upper part here. Okay, once you're done with the putting back the hose nozzle for lubricating the piston, you need to put back this pin here. Prior to put it back, you just make sure there is no bump. Sometimes the vice grip is gonna dig inside a little and make a bump that goes over the cylindrical surface. Let's say this is the surface. So what you do is with the file, you smoothly go around like that. You take a smooth file, not a coarse one. Also, some of the holes, like this one here, sometimes you have some kind of, it's almost like rust. So what you do is you tilt the hole so it hangs toward downside a little. And I use a screwdriver like that. I use the side of the screwdriver and just scratch it like on the side. So it's just gonna remove the dirt, or kind of, it's almost like rust. It's not rust, but it's gonna remove it without damaging the surface, because you're not using the forward sharp edge, you're using the side. It's that's how I did. I have a few holes that have some of that crap, a bit like this. When you see, it's not like pretty, so just make sure that you don't damage the surface, because you're gonna have a hole ring that's gonna seal that thing. So when the engine is still down and you do that, the crap is gonna go down. If you're gonna have to do something like that, where you got these holes here with the nozzle, and these holes here for the lubrication, they connect on the side of the engine. You can see here there's like two. This is the upside down, obviously, and this is the cavity where you got timing chains. These two things here, they're connect on the downside. There's like a big hole going this way. Okay, so if I turn the engine to illustrate the point. Okay, if you look at those here, these two holes, they go down, all the way down, and then there is like a hole from the side that connects all of those. Okay, if you look here on the transmission side, you'll see you got plugs here, and there's another plug right there. So we don't want to have to remove those plugs, so you make sure you don't have dirt or any debris that's gonna fall in these. So again, these are the holes. If you look from downside, these are the hole that, it's like a manifold if you want, that connects all of these nozzle together with the oil pressure. And also these holes, they're like drilled and they're joining this other kind of manifold that's going to be full of oil pressure in there. So you just want to make sure you're not gonna put debris in there, because it's going to be hard to remove those, and then you might have to try to remove those plugs, but they're not plugs meant to be removed and put back. So that's what it is. So next step is going to be to dry carefully the journals of the crankshaft. It's gotta have to be dry in order to check the gap. It's got to be out of clean of any oil or debris. Then we're gonna sit the crankshaft. Obviously, since you sit it without any oil, once you sit it, you don't want to turn it, because you're gonna damage either the bearings or you might damage the crankshaft. So gonna clean all of those, gonna sit the crankshaft without moving it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so make sure the oil pan surface is clean with the scraper. Then flip around, make sure you do the same on the other side. Then you flip it around, you make sure you clean all of that with brake cleaner, that too, especially those here. When you're done with the rags, it leaves some of that kind of crap, you just remove it. It's like bits of pieces of paper towel rag. So you clean everything. Once this is done, we're gonna put the bearings in there, all of those. This is the lower half of the lower crankcase. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. So again, you gotta make sure you know where you put the bearings. They have to be checked with your color code, and don't forget there is a notch here on top. That notch goes with the notch here. As you can see, there's no notch on that side, so you just put it right there. Make sure they're both sides is flat. Okay, and then we go with the other ones. This one is on the transmission side. This one is a different one than the others, besides the color code. Then I have one that is a unique color code. It's the third one I have to put from the left from the pulley side, so I'm going to do that one right now, because all the remainings are the same. So that's going to be the best way to avoid doing mistakes. That's what I'm going to do right now. So if you look at it this way, so this is the crank seal on the pulley side. This is the first one. So I said it's the third one, so it should be that one here. Again, the notch goes with the notch. Making sure they're both smooth. So that leaves, so I put now the one on the crank side. There's 3 blanks, 1 here and 2 there. This is corresponding to my color code, so all the remainings are the same. So you get the idea. So now I'm just gonna go and just put them all in place. There's no need, there's no risk of error anymore. Okay, when I installed that one here, the edge of it on that side, the outer edge, it was like a burr. So you gotta be careful for that. That if you put it in and you got a burr, well, on that side, it's gonna move it toward the inside, right? So it's gonna squeeze on your crank. We probably will able to see it, but just make sure that you cannot miss it. If there's a burr, you will see it. So if there's a case, what you do is first off, I use the scraper and I scrape it from the outside, that surface, going that way, so it doesn't affect the bearing surface, which is inside. And also I took the outside on a small piece of sandpaper and I like incline it that way and sand it like that, like here, to make sure it's going to be a smooth fit and there's no burr that's going to affect the fit of the crankshaft with the bearing. The other thing to notice is on the lower crankcase there's no holes for lubrication, because the oil pump is not going to bring any from this side. All the lubrication oil holes are on the upper crankcase, and there's a groove on the bearings on the upper crankcase. So these bearings are without any holes and they're smooth. So that is something that is kind of obvious, but if you are installing bearings with holes, probably you mix up things. Okay, so now we got to put the crank in the engine block. We will check the main bearings. So checking the main bearings, we'd like to have the oil for lubrication. We'd like not to have them on top. That would be the ideal setup. So when you sit the crank in, because you cannot turn it afterward, you gotta try to think about that. If it's a bit, if it's on top, well, we can always try to put the plastic gauge a bit on the, like, think about around, right? So if you put it a bit on the side, it's more likely to fall. But because if you put it on the hole, it's gonna be crushed in the middle part. It's not that easy to clean afterwards. So now this is plastic gauge. This thing is there's a little thin rod of plastic in there. There's different dimensions for that. So the one we're using is you got the dimensions here in inches. If you flip it, you'll get the dimensions in matrix system. So what I'm going to do now is you take it and you tear it apart. You take a length or a width that you tear apart that is going to fit your bearings width, right? It could be slightly smaller. You don't want to have it too much smaller. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you after that how it's made inside. So if I show it to you, let's say I tear it apart here, about that width. Just tear it apart like it would be just paper, right? And then you're gonna open this thing here, and inside you will find the plastic gauge itself. So that's the plastic gauge. It's that thin little rod. That is the one we're gonna put on top of the crank. And then to check your gap, oh, whoops. Then to check your gap, you will just screw back the lower half, the lower crankcase on it, and then you once you remove it, you can check it. I'll show you how it works. So you can see I put one right here. This is on the transmission side, so it's sitting on top. It's kind of loose. So that's why you want to put it on top of the round, so it's not gonna fall on either side. So I'm gonna do that for all the main bearings. So meaning this one, I'm gonna skip the journal for connecting rods, main bearing, skip, main bearing, skip, so on. That's what I'm gonna do. So as you can see, all the plastic gauge are in place for the main bearings. Okay, and if you cut it slightly too long, right, you just take it with your two hands, and you can easily break it. It's not hard to break at all. You want to make sure you have, when you're done, you have one piece of paper where you got your full dimension table, I would call it, on both sides. There's different type of plastic gauge. So the one that's needed for this engine is this one here. If you look at the matrix on it, that's what it is. You wanna, that's the one you need, right? So next step is to put the lower crankcase on top of it. So we got to go gently and straight because we don't want to disrupt this thing. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So we put the old bolts, but we got to be careful because these bolts going to have to be replaced. The new bolts are going to be saved for when it's going to be final assembly. So right now, the only thing we want to do is we're going to pick the slack on all of those. So right now they're just sitting in basically. But when we're going to torque them, we're going to go to, this is, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, which is the middle row. So we're going to torque those like 1, 2, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. We're going to go toward the outside. I'm going to torque them for now. The idea is just to sit the whole thing properly. So I'm going to torque them to 25 foot-pound, pound-foot. That's gonna be enough. There's no need for more than that. It's just to make sure it's sitting properly. So picked up the slack on all the bolts, torqued them all to 25 pound-foot. Now it's done. So now it's reverse. We remove all of those, starting from the outside, both hands, then going closer to the middle. So I'm going to remove all of those, and then we're going to check how it went with the plastic gauge. I forgot to mention, but I think it's obvious, before you torque the bolt to clamp those two things, just make sure that your split line is perfectly clamped on both sides. You got the pin that is about, I think it's here or here, and you got another one which is around here. Yeah, it was around here. So just make sure that this is clamped. So the bolt has been removed. Now it's time to separate the split. Remember, the best place to separate that split would be here with a pry bar. So you gently lift it up to make sure it's fine, right? So now I'm gonna remove this thing, and we're gonna check on the plastic gauge. The second place to pry would be here, just like that. So gently you just push it up and it's gonna release. Okay, so the spec I found for the gap on between the clearance, I would say, between the main bearings and the crankshaft would be between 0.025 millimeter, which would be the widest green color here. So that would be the minimum clearance, and it's up to 0.070, which would be the smallest almost, because this is 0.076. So the way you check that is you take this paper, you go close to your plastic gauge crushed, and you try to see what is the size that you have. Let me try to show you. So you go like that. So that is about this one here. So that would be 0.05. So that would be the clearance of this journal, 0.051 millimeter roughly. The wider it is, the smaller it is the gap. Smaller is the gap. So you just check all of those crushed plastic gauge. Just make sure that you're in spec. Then you clean this with a rag and brake cleaner. Once it's done, we remove the crankshaft, and then we're gonna be on the run for the final assembly. Make sure to check also your lower crankcase, because you will see there is going to be some plastic gauge on it as well. So again, clean that with a rag and brake cleaner. All the plastic gauge measuring for my engine was about 0.051 millimeter or slightly smaller, so which is bullseye in the tolerance range, which is very fine, perfect. If ever you lose track of things and you're like, geez, what was the color code that I put there? You can see here on the side you got your color of your bearing. So this one is green, this one, so you can tell this one here is green, this one here is yellow, green, and so on. So it's painted on the side of the bearing.